This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Continuing our coverage of the impact of COVID-19 here in Rhode Island, I'm Bill Bartholomew. Joining me on this episode, Dr. Louis Daniel Munoz. Now, he ran for governor of Rhode Island in 2018. He's a medical doctor with public health policy expertise and a lot of insight into this particular crisis.
Yeah, I hate to focus too much on shoulda, coulda, wouldas at this point. I think it is important to move on, but let's acknowledge where we are.
Yep.
As a country, as well as a state, and frankly, if you look at the entire world as a world, I think we acted too slowly in regards to really controlling the spread of this pandemic. This disease, this virus is strong. We only really started a relationship with it in 2003 when SARS first came out. And even SARS, it didn't spread as quickly as the novel coronavirus does. So, we don't have enough scientific kind of history to understand how to leverage the technological tools we have today to address the crisis because of the speed of its spread, right? So that's kind of where we are from a medical standpoint. We have a supply and demand issue, right? And as the demand increases, our ability to supply that demand will become more challenging and difficult. We're seeing that for both medical supplies, things as simple as swabs for diagnostic tests. And we're also, the truth is it's not being emphasized, but of course there will be concerns not only about ventilators, but just basic supplemental supplies like IV fluid, right? Eventually we will exhaust our stockpile. The country is coming together. There is hope. Manufacturers are redesigning their manufacturing lines to produce medical supplies, and so there is hope. What we've asked as a country for our citizens, for residents of Rhode Island, is to really practice social distancing. My concern as to where we are today as a state is I believe that the administration and the Department of Health have been too intentional in omitting words that are very important for Rhode Island residents to acknowledge, such as when they say we have 124 cases. The truth is that's 124 confirmed cases. Everything we know about this virus is that it spreads quickly, that one person has one infected person will likely infect 2 to 3 other people, right? And they can be asymptomatic, no symptoms at all for 14 days. And this virus can survive on surfaces for up to 17 days. Now, when you look at those facts and figures, the things that we do know about this virus, that leads to a lot of worry when considering that the governor has chosen not to shut the state down. Now, I think that there are 2 paths that could be taken. Let me be clear. If you don't want to shut the state down because you want to be in a position of economic strength, because you have some kind of political foresight into where we'll be in 3 weeks, if that's your decision, then it means that you have more work on your shoulders. It means that the Department of Health needs to take on roles that the FDA and the CDC would normally take. And instead, the DOH of Rhode Island needs to implement and provide guidance materials for supermarkets, for restaurants, for every single business, whether essential or non-essential, that is operational. Okay, whether supermarkets need to manage their workflow like a manufacturing line and bringing consumers in and out in a controlled way and sweeping and mopping those floors every hour, or whether it's a restaurant that needs to essentially block off with, saran wrap their kitchen from the food packagers, from the people that are bringing it to the curbside, right? These are things that need to be driven. These are practices that need to be driven by the governor, by the DOH. The fact is they're not doing that. Providing the public with information like wash your hands and stand 6 feet away and do not engage in groups larger than 10. It's insufficient. At this stage, it is insufficient. This virus is airborne. If you are walking down Blackstone Boulevard and you are with a friend, that's 2 people, and you think you are safe, the truth is you are walking by 25, 50 people by the time you get to that 1.6 mile walk, and then you turn back. And so we really need to start talking about the science and how what we know about the science needs to readjust our behaviors in a real common sense fashion, right? This is an airborne disease. If you're walking by even one person, you can contract the virus if that person is infected. And if any air droplets were to come out of that person through a sneeze, right, or through spit or any other form And that droplet is not something you're going to see. It's not a large bubble. So I am at this point hopeful in what the scientists of the world are doing, hopeful in the innovators and creative minds in industry that are coming together to try to make up ground to provide the supplemental care that we'll need. But where Rhode Island stands today is concerning, because we should really be preparing our residents for an understanding that we likely have more infections than 124, likely much more, that we have, as of now, with the additional ICU beds, we'll have about 210 ICU beds prepared. We know that 18 out of every 100 people will need severe to intensive care, right? They will need a lot of supplemental care. They will need to be in the hospital. That number can vary depending on demographics, depending on geography. Rhode Island, our strength, Bill, you know it, I know it. We love culture. We love the fact that we can walk between cities, between towns, and it changes. The vibe changes within a single block. Well, our strength historically has now become a blind spot for us as a state. And what we're seeing in New York City should serve as an example of the potential risk that we have in Rhode Island for a dramatic spread of this contagion if people are not listening. So whoever the naysayers out there, if you're going to say that this is not true, if you're going to say that these are simply predictive models, that it is less likely that this virus will succeed in spreading throughout Rhode Island, that somehow we're immune, then at a minimum, at least provide some constructive guidance around preventive measures. Okay, it's not a time for skepticism when all the science that we know is telling us that this is a danger, that the virus is killing young people, it's killing old people, anyone who has an immune system that's compromised, anyone who has any form of lung damage, whether mild because of vaping or severe because of years of smoking like COPD. We have urban environments and socioeconomic disadvantaged communities that have high asthma rates, that have severe asthma within those populations that need to be treated with things like steroids. Those patients will have difficulty in being treated because of the lung damage, as well as because of the medications that they've been taking time and time again that's reduced their immune response. So all in all, we need to acknowledge where we are. We need the public to understand the risk. And it's not to panic, but it's to empower the public to understand that not only should they follow the preventive measures that are very relatively high level and basic that the DOH as of now has shared, but to contribute to additional measures, additional safety measures that they can share through telecommunications with their neighbors, with their communities, to ensure that every Rhode Islander is doing their best to save lives. And that's a fact. Everyone at this point has been deputized with the responsibility to save lives.
That's absolutely true. And I think that's something that is the most frustrating part of this whole process for me has been to watch people, particularly in Newport, and that just people who don't seem to, number one, take it at all seriously, that we're in a crisis. Some people say it's a hoax and so forth, but people who just assume that because they're not likely to become ill, quote unquote, if they are infected, that somehow that gives them permission to go about their normal routine.
Well, right. Your risk increases. And the truth is, it's not people are confused. They think this is contact based.
Right.
Contact is certainly one element of it, mostly because if it's on your hands and you touch your face, it will get into your upper respiratory ways, kill cells that will then slide down into your lungs and infect your lungs. And then it's in your system. Right. And so I agree with you. We need to take this seriously. I agree that, I think this is what we're seeing today, both in terms of the economic downturn as well as the kind of response we've seen publicly. And I think it's divisive, right? I think there are people on both sides of that aisle and people somewhere in the middle. But there's been a lack of civic engagement in our country for some time. And I think this is an opportunity for young adults. I even think it's an opportunity for kids and adolescents in a very protected environment within their homes to contribute to the solution, right? Our viral messaging at this point should be about shifting the culture, shifting our behaviors, the way in which we interact. Little kids drawing, pictures about, how they're going to say hi to their friend the next time they see them. Adolescents that love poetry and hip hop and music writing, really drafting this new story that will completely, it's an intersection in human history and where we were today and telling that story through music. Those are the type of oral traditions. That's the type of kind of behavior or act today that youth can take to really help us redefine where we're going, and to encourage and empower each other, right, to all follow the straight line here. And the straight line is, practice social distancing, instate additional preventive measures to save lives. And for anyone not doing that, for anyone that has decided to risk their countrymen and countrywomen, right, their country persons, the people in this nation that have worked really hard to build up everything that we see around us, if you're willing to put them at risk, then what message are you giving to future generations, right? When we're 60, when we're 70, when we're 80, how do you want those youth to act, right? Is it in the best interest of everyone, of us when we're at that age, or just selfishly for themselves? I have hope that if you and I, Bill, and others in the community really start to send this message out, to engage, to empower youth with an understanding that their messaging, their stories can really shift the thinking here, I think things will certainly change. I will give a shout out to all of those councilmen, councilwomen, councilpersons that may now be hiding in the shadows. Well, come out of the shadows. You were elected to serve the public. I understand that you are concerned for yourself and your family. I understand that there are measures that you can take to reduce the risk of spread, right? There are measures that you can take to reduce being infected. But this public service, as much as being a medical professional, has a duty to serve, and it is a non-silent oath. And so just a call out to all of those, citywide community and public servants, especially those that have been elected to serve. It's time to get out the shadows and to lead your community in the right direction, to lead them to shelter.
I couldn't agree more with that statement. I mean, that's the moment that you look for. That's the moment where I always think of Captain Sullenberger, who flew the airplane, took off from LaGuardia and hit the birds, and then landed. I was living in New York when this happened, so he landed his commercial airliner in the Hudson River, saving everyone on board. Well, that pilot probably flew, I don't know how many tens of thousands of flight hours prior to that moment, but when that moment struck, that's where the leadership, that's where the greatness was exposed. Right. You would think there would be more of that right now. And in some cases, I mean, I look at Newport and I think just, man, what an embarrassment for that process to become a political process with the cancellation of the parade. Then they're not going to cancel it. Then they're going to give guidance on things that should be mandated. It's just, you're seeing a lot of dodging, and I wonder why. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, political positioning and political gaming, and a bit of fear, right? Yeah. And I understand. I mean, let's be empathetic. I understand. Everyone's afraid. I mean, I have a 2-year-old daughter, right? I have a father and a mother that are older than 60, right? I have friends that are immune compromised because of chronic medical conditions that they're dealing with. No one, not only, a lot of us don't want to get infected. And a lot of us have concerns even of the probability that we would get infected and then infect someone else and that person could die. I mean, those fears are real. But at this point in time, history is going to remember the leaders, again, that guided others to safety. It will. You may not be hearing it on the news today, but certainly, 2 years from now, a year from now, when we have seen the kind of the worst of this virus, at least in its current stage, people will acknowledge, those that had the courage. And so I'm trying to be very polite in the call to action. But the truth is, deep down in me, there's a fire burning. And it's one that's been really built from a lack of seeing the necessary engagement that Rhode Island communities not only need but deserve at this point in time. And it was great a year ago, right, or 2 years ago when I ran for governor, when everyone was saying the economy will never go down, everything is great, right? We have a bull economy. Well, now we don't. And now is when leaders need to step up, and they need to show that they're willing to put the interests of the people first and stop taking strong stances on economic consequences when they're not really contributing safety measures in parallel with what their economic vision is, right? Because ultimately human life is above all else. In this country, it has been, and I think it should continue to be. Absolutely.
And the other thing, too, is a lot of these ideas that I'm seeing, and you might be thinking of the same thing, the Rhode Island Center for Freedom and Prosperity put out a presser this morning, and I've been going back and forth with a few of them on the lead on that presser, which is to temporarily suspend Rhode Island's minimum wage, bring it down to the federal level, essentially try to work us back towards this, notion of wage slavery slash, post-industrial revolution tenement housing type of a workforce. But what these people don't seem to, I guess it's not even grasp or bother to put forth, is the fact that the system would probably fundamentally collapse long before they could even get those people into a job if that's the kind of direction they want. There'd be just disengagement or at some level, maybe even a rebellion.
Well, 2 points. One, I'll come back to that point in a second. But you look at the national level, right? Our congressmen, our senators, everyone was very loud in the coming months before this pandemic about other issues, impeachment, et cetera, right? But now you see this political gaming coming with the stimulus package. Both parties are trying to stick things in that package that have no relevance to what Americans need today. It's happening, the Republicans and Democrats, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating, right? Even for our, those that are representing Rhode Island, and to see that they're not really taking, I would say, a more radical step in calling their party out at this time, and they didn't, right? So hopefully the stimulus package does pass today, and hopefully for families in the state of Rhode Island and beyond and throughout the U.S. But to your point, Bill, one of the things that stood out the most with one of the press releases that from that organization was this idea to remove the ban of flavored vaping, and of all of the things you can do to try to stimulate the local economy, I don't think promoting a behavior that is already, we're getting anecdotal evidence and it's building to show that young people that vape are at higher risk for complications with the coronavirus. I don't think removing legislation that, if anything, is protecting youth from vaping or reducing, right, the amount of vaping that's happening is a positive thing. And when I say positive thing, I'm not talking economics. I'm talking about the preservation of human life. And so, I get that some people just want to make noise because it puts them in the headlines. But again, we can't suffer fools today. Today is about preserving human life here in Rhode Island and throughout the U.S.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it comes down to now is just people stepping up and understanding that, for me, it's a world challenge. Obviously, it's a global challenge, and we may learn that there is a possibility to function globally in a new and improved way following this. It very well could happen. But at minimum, zooming all the way into Rhode Island, I mean, I can't understand how anybody could attempt to politicize this or attempt to, I saw a drawing yesterday from an artist that I thought was kind of a smart guy. And he's sharing these drawings that are, basically the governor as a zombie. He's got the interpreter, Arcady, the deaf interpreter, depicted in sort of a clownish manner, just mocking the whole presentation. And again, there are significant problems in that messaging, but at the same time, the fact that someone's energy would go there rather than looking for an alternative, such as what you're proposing right now, also shows you that there's just not necessarily solutions-driven mindset by and large out there.
Right. I mean, I haven't seen that example that you're pointing out, but I do agree that, at this point, don't get me wrong. Like and you know me, Bill, I mean, I try to be very sensitive I try to make sure that when I'm providing guidance, I've reflected on that information for some time, that even if I'm basing a recommendation on anecdotal evidence on just a small sample of data because it's the only amount of data that exists, I'm still trying to focus on the intention being for the betterment of communities, of people's lives, of the state. I have certainly been frustrated with the press releases, the handling, the omission of work. So there is a time and there is a place for criticism, but if it's not teamed with constructive guidance, if not to leadership, to those that they're expected to lead, then I think it is harming what would be public confidence in leaders in general. And so I do think that we may find that we need a turnover of leaders, that we need new types of leaders in an age where pandemics can arise this quickly, can have this amount of, catastrophic impact on an economy and on people's lives. But the public also should continue to trust that there is a democratic process in place, that there are opportunities to lead as individuals in our community, and as well as to step up in leadership positions and should just really change the course of history. And at this point, we really do need a change in the course of history. It's been more of a downturn over the past several weeks. We may still see that situation worsen to some extent, but I do believe that there is hope. And I'm on this call with you, and you've granted me this opportunity, which I'm grateful for, to try to project that message out, right? I have been very critical. I have put information out there that may be concerning, but there are things that each of us can do today. There are things that our state leaders can do today that can, again, change the course of history here locally in Rhode Island and for the United States as a whole.
All right, last area here. Looking for, I guess, let's zoom in. It's been, the governor's described this as a day-to-day operation, and I think that's an appropriate way. I have as well kind of been looking at it in that context. But 2 weeks from now, from kind of drawing upon both your public policy and medical expertise, and also your human being expertise, as a husband and parent and son, et cetera, and friend, and where do you want to see us in 2 weeks right now? Where do you think, what sort of metrics, or even just, for lack of a better word, morale changes would you like to see in a couple of weeks? What's realistic?
All right. So let me break that down into 3 parts. Yep. There's the science, there's what I want, and there's what I hope. So let me kind of describe that. The science. So if you go to COVID, COVID, actnow.com/RI. That website is interesting. I wouldn't do not take it as kind of 100% truth, because it is a simulation, right? It's a predictive model. They're using a little bit of data that we have about this virus and its infection rate, and extrapolating as to what amount of infections we may have in the state of Rhode Island if we take certain measures. So if we take no measures, it'll exceed about 20,000 infections. If we do social distancing and actually follow directions, it may be somewhere between 9,000 and 10,000 infected. Yep. And then if we take even more extraordinary measures like shutting down the state, we may diminish that infection, the total infections, by even more. And the goal is to reduce the infections to such an extent where we can actually supply the healthcare that those patients will need, right? So we won't overburden our local system.
Right.
And right. So that as an example, the truth is, taking that model, taking what we know in Italy, we know that whatever we've done over the past 7 days, we won't know the consequences or the results of that for about 3 more weeks. So it really is about 4 weeks between what you do and the impact of what you do. And my concern is the leadership is a little too conservative from my perspective in terms of how they're enforcing what this social distancing is, and how there's a lack of guidance for businesses that they're allowing to continue to operate. And because of that, I do think that the science is showing that we may have a spike in the amount of infections over the next 2 weeks, and we may not see that number come down until 4 weeks from now, assuming that we also have simultaneously done some good things, right? Some people are trying to stay home and stay safe. So that's what I think the science is showing. You can look at that to look at different statistics around what the numbers may or may not be in terms of infection rate. What I want. So what I want to happen is, I want us to do one of 2 things: do more work in terms of leveraging the various departments that we have in the state, the DOH, Department of Administration, Commerce, to help businesses that are operating to restructure their operations to address what they call safety by design, prevention by design. What small changes can they make logistically and structurally within their businesses to reduce the spread beyond the human steps that are being taken in terms of social distancing? So that's more work on this administration. If we're going to keep the economy open, you want to take a stance on the economy, we have to do that. We have to put in the extra work. If not, I do believe that we should really reduce, really get to the point where we shut all non-essential operations and businesses down, at least for the next 2 weeks, in order to mitigate and reduce the potential spikes that we may see in the infection rate. Now, that's what I want from a scientific and operational standpoint, what I hope. So my hope is that, through the information that I'm sharing on my Facebook page, as well as on my other social media pages, my hope is that people will understand that in this particular case, knowledge truly is power, right? So by understanding the fundamentals or the things that we do know about this virus from a scientific standpoint, in understanding how it spreads and understanding what you can do to reduce the likelihood that you will spread it to others, that I think will reduce some anxiety. All right. And what we have now is a lot of built up anxiety. We have a lot of pressure. People want to know the truth. Well, I'm trying to share it. There are others like you, Bill, we're trying to really share information that we know is credible. And so again, my hope is that people will take that information and really challenge themselves to think about it, to not be overwhelmed by the information overload, but instead to allow that information to reduce to let them decompress, right? Decompress against it. By having that information, exactly what you should expect from your councilman, or councilwoman, or councilperson. You know exactly what you should expect from your mayor and exactly what you should expect from your governor. And as a country, if we all take an appropriate step in that direction, if we empower our children to also, in some way, shape, or form, share what their interpretation of the world today is and what it should be tomorrow, I think we're really going to be in a positive place. These things do happen. Pandemics have happened. They happened in the 50s and the 60s. Those viruses we understood a little better. But the point is that humans survive. As a species, we survive. And the important thing is that in surviving, we sustain the great attributes that our culture has today and that we not lose them. And one of those things is really caring for your neighbor. So my hope is that we'll continue to do that here in Rhode Island.
Right. I hear this conversation about, and believe me, I get it completely. I'm not immune to the effects of a stock market crash or anything like that either. I mean, but at the same time, I hear this conversation, well, we need to preserve the America that we had. We can't sacrifice that for just for public health. I mean, it's essentially, in a nutshell, I've heard that comment from the lieutenant governor of Texas. I mean, that's sort of a viral video right now. People need to walk back to, it was only a few hundred years ago that there was a revolution against an empire where I'm sitting right now, where you're sitting right now, people fighting, well before modern technology and medicine or anything like that. People literally dying, by the thousands just on the notion that there could be a society based on innovation, a society based on compassion, a society based on equality. And
right. And I agree. And look at Napoleon Hill, right? Historically, the author of Think and Grow Rich, probably one of the biggest proponents of capitalist system over the last 100 years. And even Napoleon Hill, would say, look around the world. Look at the floor you're walking on. Look at the buildings that are built, right? Each of those things were once ideas that came from people. So we can't diminish the value of human life today with this on the basis of this idea that the economy will thrive without people, right? Each human being in this economy has a role, has value, from the creators and the innovators to the builders, right? And the tradesmen, tradeswomen, tradespersons. So the truth is that, people out there can politicize, they can politically game, they can take strong stances. But as I mentioned before, history will remember those that guided others to safety and shelter.
Dr. Munoz, he ran for governor in 2018 as an independent, raised some hell out there, and got attention from a lot of really important sectors during that election. And now just, somebody I hope we can do this a few more times here in the next couple of weeks if you'd be up for it.
Yeah, I'd love to help, whether it's a Q&A session with the public or information around what we're continuing to learn with the progress, or just talking about, some of the economic challenges that we're facing. I'd love to. Thanks,
all right,
Bill.
Let's keep it going. All right, thanks, Doc.
All right, sounds
Appreciate
good.
it.
All right.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.